Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Workscapes. I'm Samantha Olenek. I am the Vice President of Community Engagement here at Workscapes. And it is such a delight and honor to see each and every one of you. I am just beaming. I'm looking around and I see all these wonderful, wonderful people, and it means so much that you guys are here. I know that there are countless places that you can be, but the fact that you chose to be here tonight really, really warms my heart. So, before we get to this esteemed panel, I want to tell you a little bit what went into this. I had a dream. I really am a person that wants to spread light and love in this world, and I knew some individuals that are doing that. And I thought, how could I bring these amazing humans together and share this message? And so that's what happened tonight. And so it's my hope that you will meet somebody new, perhaps get a business deal, but fill your bucket as well, because that's so much more important. So again, thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And I want to introduce you to another amazing human. He's standing right next to me. This is Will Dvorak, and his parents started this company 26 years ago. And it's really incredible, and I'm just so thankful that he's here because tonight's his birthday. So he's been living this epic 30-year birthday. So if you could just do a little birthday song for me, this would be amazing. So if you guys know the birthday song, let's do it. All right, come on, let's get the energy up in the room. Birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Will, happy birthday to you. Yay! Awesome. So I'm going to have him share a little story about Workscapes.
I knew there's maybe a reason why I shouldn't come tonight, but no, thank you guys. For those that you don't or haven't been here or don't know our company, we're Workscapes. We were fortunate that my mom got this idea when she was working at the Steelcase dealer in Atlanta, so she started out of her house, and then in about 6 months, we kind of risked everything and moved our family here to Orlando, bought a failing dealership here, and it was kind of crazy. You don't really think about these things when you're growing up. You're just like, oh, we get to move all the time. So it was kind of like the military without the military when you got serial entrepreneur parents. But, I heard a lot of stories about leadership growing up. I've heard all the leadership books from my folks growing up. I didn't really start to understand leadership until I really got into it. And so I think everyone in this room has worked for a leader that they've admired. They've worked for a leader that maybe they didn't have a good jive with. And so, people really get into leadership, and I'm so glad to hear our panelists tonight if they really want to serve. You're not into leadership for the title. You're not into leadership for maybe the big pay or to put a cool sign on your office, but it's really if you want to serve. And so that is what really drew me to leadership, and I'm so fortunate that I get to work with such a great team and a great community. And Orlando has been really, really good to us, and we are so fortunate as a company that we actually have in this room our first ever hire as a company, and she's standing right there.
Oh my God.
And we have our 5th ever hire, and she's sitting right over there. And so leaders don't make great companies, people do. And you can't have great people without great leadership. They kind of go with one and one. And so I'm just very fortunate. I'm so glad that we have a great panelist and we have all these great people in the room to talk to one another, because I'm really blessed, and I grew up very blessed because of the people in this room and this community. So I couldn't be more honored just to be here and spend my 30th birthday with you guys. So thank you very much.
All right, real quick, tonight would not be possible without the amazing sponsors. So where are my friends from Little? Come on. Woohoo! Thank you all. And then how about my friends from Brassfield and Gorey? Woohoo! When I shared this idea with them, they were all in from the beginning. So now I'm going to introduce you to this esteemed panel. And we thought a little bit about giving you their rock star CVs, but we're like, no. So you're probably wondering, how do I know all these amazing humans? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I know each and every one of them. So Navy Bob, I worked with Navy Bob at AdventHealth. And Navy Bob and I both serve on a mental health board, NAMI Greater Orlando. And so we became very good friends. And I have a story about how much we live in Mayberry. When I was talking to Navy Bob, he actually served on the same submarine as my brother. Wow. But I believe that the universe really brought us together because there's so much that we share in common. And so that's how I know Navy Bob. And then Dr. Kuhlman, I worked with him also at AdventHealth, and he created a media firestorm when he started. Because he actually served, he was a physician to several presidents. And so the media was hounding to talk to him. But I was the only one that he would talk to. And the media had to come through me first. So that's how I know Dr. Kuhlman. And then Kristen Collins, again, I think the universe, again, puts like-minded people together. And we met in our Leadership Florida group, which is a very esteemed Leadership Florida group. And if you're not in Leadership Florida, where are my Leadership Florida friends? Or anyone in here? Woo! It's something that you really, really need to do. You will meet so many amazing people. And that's how I met Kristen. And we just shared so many wonderful things. And so our moderator, and I always call her Kelly Ripa. Doesn't she look like Kelly Ripa?
She's cuter.
I've known her for decades, and our kids went to school together, but we also shared a love for mental health. And so Tracy Zaboral is actually going to kind of walk us through. She's going to be our kind of MC for the night. So without further ado, I thank you again for being here, and get ready to be inspired and have a great time.
Yay, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks, Sam, for organizing this entire thing tonight. I'm teasing, she's like mother of the bride tonight. She did a good job. So I am so thrilled to be here and have the opportunity to join in with the three of you, because a lot of what I do professionally overlaps what we're going to be discussing tonight. So I've been in the field of mental health for about 40 years. So as a kind of an expert in human behavior, a lot of what we do overlaps, and I'm just as passionate about this stuff as you all are. So we took the tagline, Leading with Love, from Navy Bob's book, Beyond the Sea, and it's kind of the focal point for tonight. Whether we're discussing leadership, emotional well-being, enhanced performance outcomes, or physical healing, we're going to see how the simplistic human factor of love dovetails with all the different strategies that these thought leaders have outlined in their books. It's not exactly the most expected focal point, especially when you got these tough guys, Navy commanders, physicians to the presidents, but we feel that it could not be more overdue and kind of more timely. I mean, especially we're in this kind of chaotic cycle. You know, we're in this election cycle. We've got global turmoil. We've also got a lot of storms that are catastrophic that whole communities are reeling from. And so we actually feel that there almost needs to be a sense of urgency in illustrating that love and compassion, when authentic and true, yields more powerful and transformative change when it's the underlying human factor to any strategic approach. So I'd like to start now by having each of the authors kind of walk us through their experiences that led them down the paths outlined in their books. And by the way, I just want to encourage you're all like-minded peers, so I want to encourage kind of an open dialogue. So, Navy Bob, let's start with you. Fun fact, he got that nickname from President Bush, and apparently it stuck.
Yeah,
Your 28-year career in the Navy as head of the largest nuclear submarine squadron, like hello, makes you an expert in leading a population that is historically known as tough guys. What was your inflection point that helped you appreciate that relationships built on trust and with a loving approach would yield the most effective performance outcomes?
Well, thank you, Tracy, and it's such an honor and privilege to be here. And so it's just remarkable to be in the same audience as some of all of you. So I just want to take you back about the book and Leading with Love. And I want to tell you how this came about. It took me 5 years to write this book. And Leading with Love was not in the vocabulary. It was not even on the radar. I just wanted to start telling my submarine stories. And as I started going through a chronological history of my life of working underneath some incredible toxic leaders where outcomes would be terrible. But then you go on some submarines and it would be magical. And you felt this wholeness, this fulfillment, this love. And so I came across this. So I want to take you back on where I learned this. So when I was a commanding officer on board the USS Texas, it was a $2 billion nuclear submarine. And imagine that you're miles away from your home port of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And you're behind enemy lines. And you're a stone throws away from the most capable adversary submarine about to do an event that you're there to collect for mission success. And they have no idea that you're there. The only thing that's exposed underneath the cloak of the ocean while you're at periscope depth, cruising along, is the periscope. The periscope is the only thing that's sticking up out of the water, and you're focused down the bearing of this event. And you're surrounded by their entire fleet, the most capable adversary out there. And let me tell you what was at stake. If they found that we were there, they would have closed off the areas. They would have done everything possible to get us to surface so they can take pictures of us to be on the front page of USA Today. And when I say that they would have done everything possible for us to surface, they would have used force such as colliding with us. They would have used force as in depth charges. And so there was a lot at stake. And I'll tell you what else was at stake if we didn't collect on this. If you take the cost of this $2 billion nuclear submarine and the number of cycles that we get to do these missions of vital to national security, plus the cost of the crew, the cost of the maintenance, the cost of the food, all the supplies, this one event that we were at was about $100 million to taxpayer dollars. So you can imagine the stress that we were under. This was no movie, something from the Hunt for Red October. This was for real. And so I was the captain, the old man, doing this. We've never been in this area before because of political events, but it was a resurgence. And so all of a sudden we were focused on the bearing of this event. This event was about to occur, this exercise, and the other fleet was there. And all of a sudden I heard something breaking already of the saturated radar that was coming through our listening devices. So I tell the officer of the deck in control of this periscope with a limited view, I say, do a safety sweep, which meant look around because I heard something coming in. And as he's doing the safety sweep, we see this aircraft coming right at us. And that aircraft has one purpose. That purpose is to find us. And they're equipped to find submarines. So I immediately yell, down scope! And as the scope is coming down, I saw the pilots in the cockpit. I could read the tail number of this plane. You can imagine the anxiety just spike. And all of a sudden, there's 30 people around the control room. Old man, the captain, what are we going to do? They start getting concerned. I turned to my second in command, Gary Montalvo, the XO. I said, this isn't good. Then I announced, as we waited to see if there was other interaction from this aircraft, after about 2 minutes, we had to raise the scope to see if we were counter-detected and to see if we missed the event. So I directed the scope to be raised. As the scope was coming up, about a minute out of the water, my operations officer in the next room said, Con radio, in receipt of message traffic. This message traffic indicates that that plane detected an adversary submarine. Firecracker, 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 which is our code word that we were counter detected. And we were trained immediately. If we have indications of counter detection, we get out of there. We got out of there as soon as possible because they could have been closing off the area. We would have been trapped. National security was at stake. So out of my mouth, I was about to announce, left hard rudder, make your depth 400 feet. All ahead standard. This is the captain. I have the con. We're aborting this mission. My mouth was about to open. As my mouth was opening, my executive officer, Gary Montalvo, steps right in front of me, puts his hand in my face, and he says, Captain, Captain, Captain. He says, let's stick around to see if they have us. And when you read the book, he used some other Navy terms. And I paused. And then someone else spoke up and says, that turnaround time, that's two independent things, it doesn't seem right. There's something not right. And then someone else spoke up. And it wasn't us. It was miles away. But the chances I thought was 99, I thought it was 100%. But why did my executive officer? Because if he was wrong, our protocol was to leave immediately. And underneath all the information we had, anybody in their right mind would have left. So his reputation was at stake. He would have probably not made commanding officer if they did the deep dive, the investigation after. Why did he do that? And in my book, I realized it was love. It was love. Love was the reason. The reason why he did that, because he sacrificially gave himself for the benefit of me and the other crew members, because we would do the same. We would sacrificially give ourselves for the benefit of others. Just like Will said, there was a mindset that it wasn't about me. It wasn't about the individual. It was about the people we serve. That is where I first learned about leading with love in this book.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I love that we were able to have a story to illustrate, because that's always just, that's what a lot of you will take away tonight is the story, right? Okay, Dr. Kuhlman, on to you. Your varied and impressive background of also 30 years in the Navy, along with years in aviation, in aerospace medicine, not to mention Obama's personal physician and the White House physician for numerous years. Again, hello. It gave you plenty of opportunities to observe what's working and what isn't. So walk us through your own discovery within the healthcare industry that made you address safety and quality care, both of which are facing unprecedented challenges, using the Navy's reliable approach.
So it's always kind of good to be in the right place at the right time. So from 97 to 2013, Clinton, Bush 43, his dad came around a bit, so then that's 41. And then President Obama, luckily red and blue, they're all the same inside, so they kept me around as a doctor. Also, Biden was there as the vice president, so I count that as 5. And then Hillary Clinton we took care of. So I say that's 5.5 presidents.
Yeah.
So, because, and often people ask, well, who was your favorite? Well, I have 4 kids, so you say, who's your favorite kid? You may think something, but the right answer is I love them all. So one thing I learned from, President Clinton is he had, if you're around him, like for 1 minute, he focuses on you and he has a presence about him that at that moment in time, he makes you feel like the most important person in the world. And then 10 years later, if he interacts with you, he remembers your name, he remembers your spouse's name, he remembers what you talked about, and he just picks up. And so there's something about having that personal connection, leading with love, that you care about other people as opposed to just self-absorbed. It seems like a lifetime ago now, January of 2001, the turn of the century, and President Bush came into office. He was 54. He and Laura, they were empty nesters. So what are empty nesters? Jenna went off to the University of Texas. Barbara went to Yale, up in New Haven. So what do you do when you're empty nesters? whatever you want. so at the White House, they would take care of, he would be up and over to work by 6:45 in the morning. And he liked to give nicknames. So he and his dad, they tried like Quincy. His dad would call him Quincy, and that didn't really stick. Then they would go with like 41 and 43, and that's kind of the one that they ended up with. But if he liked you, he was a Air Force fighter pilot, and we all know how to deal with those. He wants to poke you with a big stick, metaphorically, and then he wants you to poke him back, just not as hard. So Bob came in, and he's in the Navy, and instead of saying commander, he maybe called you commander the first day or something. And then after that, it would be Navy Bob, because there's just something, so that stuck. So he came up with a nickname for me, and I have no idea where he got it. So he called me Leno. And
Leno.
yeah. And so with that, it got to be that like his wife, Dr. Rice, everybody, all the cabinet members I took care of, they didn't know my name. They go, oh, Dr. Leno. But you also realize that that's that personal connection that you build upon. And President Obama, his style was just a little bit different. He came in, and I was the director of the medical unit, and he said, well, I don't really need a doctor, but Michelle and the girls do, so I want you to be the physician to the president. So I wasn't offended. I took that as the highest honor, because if a person wants you to take care of their family, then that's pretty good. And there's lots of medical issues that he came in at 47 that you kind of just take care of somebody and they take care of you. So with that, there's different ways to lead. And the other thing so Navy Bob and I were, I call him kind of Dr. Death, because he's carrying the nuclear codes to end the world. I mean, that's why he's there, right? And I'm carrying a defibrillator and medications, and so I can save life. So I'm Dr. Life, he's Dr. Death, and or good and evil. You can decide how you want that. But having that power is also what makes America the most powerful, the most. So as long as we use that in a good way for deterrence.
So going back, one great event that I saw. So whenever the president would go into the elevator, there were 3 required people to be in the elevator with him. One is a Secret Service agent to protect him. One is a doctor in case he has a medical emergency if the elevator stucks, and the person with the nuclear codes in the event that we have. And so the doors closed, and President Bush would use this opportunity to just joke around and so forth. And so one day we were in Australia, we're in the elevator, and he goes, Leno, where did you get that jacket? That's a beautiful jacket. Where'd you get it? And Leno didn't say anything. I'm like, Leno, you got to talk. This is the President of the United States. And you could tell he's getting a little like, Leno, where'd you get the jacket? And he goes, Target. And the door's open, we walk out.
Yeah, so I was good for jokes and monologue, and something about maybe the chin, the body build, the white
Leno.
hair. And then I did actually, 2012, President Obama was campaigning. He did 200 trips that year. I did 120. And so he was in Burbank Studios, and we go into the Jay Leno show, or Tonight Show, I guess, Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And they rushed me up to the front, and I got to take pictures with Jay Leno. Because Jay Leno says, hey, I hear I'm famous at the White House. So it's something about, making every single person feel important.
Right. Okay, well, that is a very fun answer to my question. And another kind of, I guess, like, these are little stories that people will take with them, and it's awesome. Okay, now, Kristen, on to you. A little fireball of passion for this stuff. Kristen, you were a longtime executive in the healthcare industry and were having some debilitating physical issues. What occurred for you that helped you see that self-love was a key piece for dramatic physical healing and appreciating that there truly is a mind-body connection?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's such an honor to be here with you all tonight. And Sam, thank you so much for pulling us together. Mental health is a passion, and I had spent 50 years loving everyone except myself. I was very, very good at loving everyone else. I took really good care of myself as far as lifestyle. I ate right, I exercised a lot. I was a vegan triathlete, slept great, had a lot of community relationships and connections. And one day, I did some blood work where they measured 100 markers in my blood, and 99 of them were fantastic. But the one marker that they didn't measure was inflammation. So I'm on the phone with my physician, and we're discussing this outcome, and we're like, that's so weird. Why didn't they measure for inflammation? And we spent a few minutes ruminating on that, and then we were getting ready to get off the subject and be like, I don't know why they forgot that one of the 100. And we realized that my marker was not only off the chart, but it was almost off the page. I was well over 100% inflamed. And I didn't know a lot about medicine, but I knew that in the state of inflammation, disease is created. So I got very frustrated because I'm like, hi, I'm like the pillar of health. What am I doing wrong? And that sent me on a journey to try to understand why I was so deeply and chronically inflamed. And unfortunately back then, there wasn't a pathway or like a quick YouTube video I could watch. I really had to go on my own exploration. And I realized that I had known I had severe trauma as a child, but I thought I had dealt with it and it was all fine, only to find out that I had done an excellent job of dissociating from it and stuffing it and ignoring it. And it was through my outpouring of loving everyone else that I was able to keep my own self-loathing and my shame and my just discomfort with self at bay. So that led me on this incredible ride to understand that I need to stop the madness of taking care of everyone else and leading with love externally, that I needed to embody love. So that was my triggering moment.
Yeah, that's an awesome, and I mean, here you are to show that physically you're doing great.
Yep.
Okay, that's beautiful. So now in this next set of questions, I'd like you each to explore what are some other moments in your life outside of the submarine, the Navy, the healthcare industry, where you observed the culture of leading with love, or even if it was within your professional experience, just simply help us understand what that culture would look like. Dr. Kuhlman, why don't we start with you?
So if you look at the Navy or the military in general, their culture is very much authoritarian, do what you're told, hierarchical, defend and deny, and that's the culture that I would even say most of the military has today. I learned a lot from Navy Bob, and one of those is any catastrophe that happens in the world, Chernobyl, space shuttle disasters, they all go to the nuclear Navy, who has been in for 75 years. They've never, ever, not once, had a nuclear reactor mishap. So how do you take 160 18-year-olds, put them on this steel tank, and go under the polar ice cap for months on end, and never ever, with the most, enough weapons to end the world? So from the nuclear Navy, 75 years ago, Hyman Rickover. So Admiral Rickover, he knew that you had to change the culture. So he had to change the culture, so he introduced watchstanding principles, which Bob and I stole from him and plagiarized. and repackage them as the pillars of high reliability. And once I say them, you'll never forget them. And if you transpose that to healthcare today, unfortunately, we have the same culture in healthcare. Authoritarian, do what you're told, defend and deny. We have some superstar leaders, like Scott has taken healthcare systems that are D and made them A, and low ranking and made them high. And there's others in healthcare that probably have done that. But the 5 pillars have a higher level of understanding. So how do we get the 1 million physicians, the 2 million nurses, many of them now in their 20s, the majority are under 35. How do you have a higher level of understanding of what you're doing? You're not just starting an IV, you're going to infuse life-saving fluids so that this patient, this grandmother, can be at her grandson's 30th birthday. And then the second pillar is integrity. Whether anybody's looking or not, you are doing the right thing. The third is formality, both in procedure, formality in communication, and then have a questioning attitude, and then back each other up. And that's the high-functioning quarterback. So that's high reliability, not just healthcare, but any industry. That's the secret of high reliability. So culture is just as important, but you have to marry it with leadership. So leadership, culture, we'll talk about management system in a bit, but leadership with love, and then a culture that's based on those 5 pillars. And that's what I've learned from Navy Bob.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's a pretty precise answer. I like
Yeah.
it. Do you guys have anything? I mean, he learned that from you, but Navy Bob, you got anything you want to share?
Sure. One thing that I learned, I've been extremely inspired by Mr. Rogers. And I went to Rollins College. I got my doctorate in business administration. And I knew he went there, but that was the extent. And I don't know if you know this, in 2022, the Elizabeth Bonkers, who was the commencement speaker, was on ABC News. How is it possible this small business school, valedictorian, is on ABC News? And if you Google her, David knows her, Outahowski, who's here from the Edith Bush, she's nonverbal autistic. She can't speak, and she could type with one finger. And she ended up being the valedictorian because of the culture at Rollins College. They had this love of accepting everybody. And in her speech, she talks about Mr. Rogers and how she wants to make this a role model for other disabled people so that they can do it too. And when she says that Mr. Rogers, when he died, he had a note in his wallet that said, "Life is for service." And he got that, "Life is for service." It's embedded on one of the buildings at Rollins College. So this love is permeated through Rollins College. And Mr. Rogers has this famous quote. It is, "Love and then success." It's always in that order. It's that simple and that difficult. So leaders, just like Will said, if you put love first, put your people first, success will follow. But when leaders, all they worry about is success, productivity, it's a formula for disaster. And Mr. Rogers knew this. And Mr. Rogers says that God has put us on this earth for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to serve others. And when you find that service to others, like you all have done, the wholeness, fulfillment that you will feel will be undeniable. So one of my greatest aspirations and people that I admire immensely is Mr. Rogers, and I learned it right here in Winter Park in Orlando.
That is beautiful.
Well, I'd like to piggyback off you, if that's okay.
It's dangerous.
I can handle it. I can handle it. My first 30 years professionally, I was one of those leaders that I was like, just try to keep up. Like, I'm going and I'm excited about it, and I did have a lot of fun success as a leader with other people getting excited about the things that I was excited. But I was a solopreneur. I was solo. And in my healthcare profession, I changed my role from being a fundraiser to getting involved in health and well-being as I was solving my own health and well-being problems. And I started reporting to a gentleman. is Scott Cashman. And Scott has a background in psych, so he knew how to lead me. He knew how to lead, and he held space to listen and bring out the best in everyone on his team. I had never been in an environment where I felt so seen and understood, and the self-discovery that I went through in those 5 years of getting to know who I was, instead of telling me what to do or not to do, but holding that space for me to have it come out of my own mouth. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was inside of me. I had the most inspiring portion of my professional life with that. And I showed up every day excited, ready to go, and it was very therapeutic and healing for me because I got to know myself. So leading with love, from that place of being in community, of listening to your team, of removing the obstacles. I would laugh. I only got together with Scott for like an hour a month. And in that hour, he'd be like, so what are we at? What are we doing? What's going on? What's happening? So I had my checklist, and I had them in priority order. And all of a sudden, he'd whip out his phone, and he would start. And I'm like, oh, he's distracted. What is he doing? And before I was finished with my thinking, he had already removed the obstacles or made that connection for me so that I could proceed. So, Scott, you've been that light for me and that model of leadership. That's why you took Lee Health from Leapfrog D to Leapfrog A. And thank you for showing me how to lead with love.
So, Scott Cashman, you need to stand up. You've been called out twice now. Yes. He's Exhibit A right there, leading with love. Okay, thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
So now in this last set of questions, in all of your varied experiences, you've all seen toxic environments and you've seen thriving environments. Can you help us understand your observations, allowing the audience to appreciate that we can deliberately help create legendary environments? Maybe, Bob, maybe we should start with you on that one.
So, absolutely. So, if you get a chance, read the book. One of my first commanding officers, his nickname, I didn't come up with this, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but his nickname was MFB, and he was a toxic leader, and it was the most miserable experience of my life. I didn't want to continue in the Navy. I came home one day, and I told my wife, I said, don't you let me stay in one more day than I have to in this Navy. And then 28 years later, 8 years underwater, here I am. But then I went to go see this Leading with Love, different culture. And if the reason why I'm so ingrained in this, why this is so important, we spend 40 to 50% of our time at work. And so we've been dealing with mental health from the Community Care Act with John F. Kennedy since 1963, when they closed the state mental health hospitals. And so we keep on using the same game plan, which is necessary, number of beds, number of psychiatrists, number of they're all working. But we're now at the point we're in a crisis mode where our youth is really having severe mental health concerns. And so we have to go all hands on deck. And so what I found throughout my research, we need to go to the workplace. It starts with a toxic leader. An HBR article that came out that showed that a high trust versus a low trust environment, you're 74% less stress, 40% less burnout, productivity goes up, and I experienced that, and I know exactly what they're talking about. Because if you're less stressed at work, you're less probability, 3.5 times more likely to have a substance use disorder, which leads to mental well-being, and then seeking help. So let's go all hands on deck to do this. And so I will tell you that, also in the book, the Texas, when I first took over, was a terrible culture as well. We were ranked last in the squadron. We almost failed a major inspection, and we had a terrible turnover. And we were about to take this ship underneath the North Pole to certify it for Arctic operations, first ever. It was dangerous. And you ever hear the game whack-a-mole? So on a nuclear Navy, you think because of all the standards, you would think we wouldn't have problems, but there were some significant problems, and it was like playing whack-a-mole. It wasn't when, it wasn't if, it was when and where, every day. And so what I wanted to do, like MFB, I wanted to turn to the dark side. I wanted to punish people. I wanted to just hold them accountable, but I didn't. Because how I learned with love, I looked myself in the mirror and I said, what am I doing? What culture am I setting? What barriers are I doing to make this crew not function? And I did something simple like a crew top 3. I said, what are your top 3 concerns, instead of holding them accountable? And I realized there were so many issues that they were occurring that I didn't know. And that was the light bulb that went off. It was because they didn't care for the ship or organization. Why didn't they care for the organization or ship? Because the organization and ship didn't care for them. And once I started solving their issues and they saw that I had the mindset of leading with love, I cared about them, I concerned, I fixed the problems, that was the magical moment that we went from the worst to the best about 2 years later. And you mentioned it is hard. But once you build that trust, you build that love, your outcomes, it's like going 88 miles an hour. All of a sudden, there was an inflection point. And I remember us being at the North Pole, seeing that picture. It was that point where the culture shifted, where the sailors were no longer worried about making a mistake because they were going to get in trouble. They were worried about making a mistake because they didn't want to let down the ship or their shipmates. And when you get to that point, that inflection point, they start policing other people. And your outcomes will go up unbelievable. You become a legendary leader and you build a legendary culture. That is the gift of leading with love.
Oh, that was a great answer. We could just stop right there.
No.
Mic drop. Do either of you, Kristen, would you like to,
Okay, I'd love to. As previously mentioned, I was leading from the front and clearly had all the answers. And it was a maturation that took me a long time to understand that maybe the way I saw things wasn't the best way. Maybe that wasn't the only way. Maybe that wasn't even the truth. And it was in a very fateful conversation I had with a woman who is a very successful executive coach. And she explained to me that 90% of my thinking is based in my subconscious mind. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I don't get what that means. And it was actually a conversation I was having with her because my husband and I got in a fight. And I was obviously right, and he was obviously wrong. And this fight was lasting, and we didn't fight a lot, and this fight was lasting, and I was very upset. So I was confiding in her. I was like, I'm kind of concerned, like we're in a fight. And she said, well, you're both seeing your truth. And that he has his own perception based on his subconscious thinking, his neural pathways that were created when his brain was developing. And you have your own lens, your own biases from your neural pathways and your experiences. So you're both right in your own mind. So I had to ponder that for like a really long time. How can two people have an experience and have a different truth about it? And then never mind two people that actually really love each other and are committed to figuring it out. How do we as a culture or a society function when every single one of us, every one of us right now is having a very different experience based on our subconscious thinking? So that was an aha moment that I've now sat in for almost 10 years. And so your question was about toxic environments.
Right.
So I would then show up at work or in community, and I'm like, this is super interesting. I hate all of this. Like, I'm not in alignment with this meeting, right? I don't agree. But instead of being frustrated that everyone had to see what I saw, I actually paused. And I was like, that's really interesting that everyone here is having a different idea. And it opened me up to be able to contemplate, how do we show up? How do we maybe look at this differently? What can I learn from somebody else's share? And if this collective is so toxic, what is my role in that toxicity? And then I have the option of removing myself if I don't like it. I don't have to convince everybody else to see what I see. So that was a really big aha for me with toxic environments. It was simply that we're all having a different experience, and we all have the capacity to rewire that subconscious thinking if we so choose. And that actually was the exploration of my second book, Be Love, was understanding that neuroplasticity and how we can create any opportunity and be in harmony with others that we're not necessarily seeing the same as.
Tracy, if I can just add something.
Of course.
So Dr. Kuhlman is like a brother to me, so I'm not going to speak about him. He already knows how I feel about him. I met Christine literally maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And I knew there was something missing in this book. This book is a practical example for any leaders at any age, in any industry, of how you lead with love. But I realized you can't lead with love if you don't love yourself. And when I read her book, her phenomenal book, Be Love, that was a match made in heaven. And so what she's doing and what she provides people that she interacts with, you're a remarkable person. I just wanted to call you out and being so amazing.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. It means the world. Thank you. That kind of boosts me up after sitting here with these two, right. Washington, D.C., military, healthcare gods. So,
well,
thanks, Bob.
Right. I mean, and then she also threw in this little, quick version of neuroplasticity, which happens to be my field. And I'm like, oh, she did a good job. You did a good job.
It's my favorite word. It's the buzzword right now. Neuroplasticity.
Yeah. So did you have something, Dr. Kuhlman, that you wanted to add?
So maybe a quick vignette of, if I think about different leadership styles, so the summer of 2008 was the Olympics. So the Olympics in Beijing were August 8, 2008, because 8's a special number for them. So 2 months ahead, I went over and did the pre-advance planning for President Bush and the dignitaries from the American delegation to go. So, when I got there, I'd been to China a few times before. The Chinese government, they wanted to control every single movement I did, and the embassy doctor was in with him, and so they go to this hospital. It's the military hospital next to the bird cage, or that was there. The bird's nest. Sorry, the bird's nest, the venue, and so I looked through it and I said, okay, I'd like to go to Peking Union. That's the most capable hospital, and they wouldn't let me, and I just said, okay. Let me know when you'll go, because I'm just going to go on my own. So we went there, and they took me up to the VIP, think Ritz-Carlton type. And I said, well, this is nice, but that's not what I want to see. What I want to see is if you're going to have a gunshot wound or a knife stabbing, and they got infuriated. That will not happen here. And I said, I know, but this is what I do anywhere I go. I want to see the decon unit outside the ED, they looked at me funny. In the emergency department, the trauma surgeons where they would go, and the post-op, ICU care, and this will not happen here. And I said, okay. And then, so they showed me all that, and I said, who are the teams that are going to take care of it? Well, trauma team will be at home, and they'll get called in. And I said, well, in my experience, you can't get in when you control the city during events like that. So they said trauma team A will be here, and then trauma team B, they'll swap out, after 24 hours. So fast forward to August 8, opening ceremonies. President Bush is sitting next to Putin, and the Republic of Georgia is actually, if you remember, the barracks got invaded that night. And basically, if you read President Bush's book, you were there, that Putin just denied everything. Oh, we got it under control, while hundreds of Georgian soldiers died. So they chose that moment in time. But what happened was Hugh McCutcheon, who's the Olympic coach, his wife, who is a former Olympian, her parents and her were walking through the bell tower at Tiananmen Square. And this crazy man pulled out a knife, decapitated her dad, and stabbed her mom, steps behind her multiple times. So the trauma plan that we had for the president, they utilized it for her. They took her to Peking Union, and they saved her life. And so after I came back from that opening ceremony, the last thing I want to do, it's a long day, so I I went over and checked on her along with the critical care nurse, Chuck, who was one of the White House nurses. We looked at all of the, like the lines coming in, and there's little tiny Chinese characters written on them. And we had no idea, but we kind of looked and said, well, you know, these are the medicines, these are the fluids. And she got 80 units of blood, but then I found out they call them, they're half units. So that's like 30 or 40. Their sizes are different. So just with that, when I came back, the First Lady was there, and she had been waiting because she wanted firsthand, because she cared about that American who was there. And again, the Chinese government didn't want to transfer afterwards. The embassy doctor wanted to send her to Hong Kong, and I said, you can't do that. So she was from Rochester, Minnesota, so I arranged that she flew from medevac from Beijing to the Mayo Clinic. And so still get Christmas cards from her. She has some mental health issues, some PTSD, but she's alive and well. And to me, just the leadership with love that was displayed by, you know, the president, by the First Lady. Read about Navy Bob telling you about during the surge every morning what the most important thing to the president was. That's just it's a way that you don't want to be an authoritarian. You want to be able to lead with love, and your teams will be great, and you'll be able to build a culture.
Oh, wow. Well, all three of you really ended on a very illustrative story for all of us to take away tonight to kind of sum up. And I just want to thank all three of you for the work you're doing, for putting the efforts into writing these books so that we have the opportunity to really learn from you guys as thought leaders in such a simplistic way of love, and yet it really doesn't get talked about enough. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you just enjoy now a little bit of networking, something to eat, something to drink. And thanks again.